So, Dina, when we broke, you had walked us through this dynamic as to why how digital advertising is sold is so important to us, not just as consumers, but as citizens, and why we have a dynamic now where two companies, essentially Google and Facebook, dominate this this market. I mean, in a way that it's stunning. It's almost you don't even need to say a market. You just need to say these two companies, and you've covered just about all the bases. And how their domination and their tracking of us, which is tied into their domination of advertising, fundamentally undercuts a huge, important element of society, and that is a vibrant media and press. So pick it up from there. We had stopped there where you were going to explain to us why this tracking of my online activity or anyone's online activity begins to undermine local newspapers, national newspapers, I guess, TV outlets, in any way that people get their news.
In order to understand this concept, we have to understand how the ads are bought and sold at an individual level. So I'm going to run through this scenario really quick. If you go to a website, let's say you land on the New York Times in the morning and you're reading an article, in the milliseconds that it takes that page to load, information about your identity and other information that companies can tie to your identity, let's say that's credit card data or purchase history data, gets sent to online ad auctions, and thousands of companies can bid on the ability to show you an ad at that particular moment in time. And one of those companies wins, and then the New York Times displays the ad on your screen, and you don't know that all this happened. You just see the content on the page, and you just see the ads on the page. So, but this is the process that's happening every time you see an ad online. Everything gets traded in real-time auctions and in real-time environments. So one of the reasons we have dominance problems in the industry is because of what Facebook and Google are able to force independent news publishers to do from a privacy perspective. So let's run through this. You go to the New York Times, you read let's say you read the automotive section, right? So the New York Times knows that you are reading the automotive section, you're interested in a particular type of car, and it can take that information and send out that information to automotive manufacturers that might want to bid on the opportunity to show you an ad at that instant. Let's say the clearing price for those types of ads for cars, if you're in the market for a new car, let's say it's like a $40 cost per thousand, right? This is how ads are sold. So $40 CPM. Now imagine that you later go in the afternoon and you go onto Facebook and you're looking at family photos. Facebook knows you're on Facebook, you're looking at family photos, and Facebook wants to now show you ads. But let's say they can only sell those ads for, let's say, a $5 CPM because it can only target you with ads for, let's say, Tide laundry detergent or other household goods because you're looking at lots of ads that have lots of babies in it. So what happens is Facebook goes to the New York Times and other publishers and says, hey, if you want to use our social network and you want to plug into our social network, you have to give us the right to watch and record what your readers are reading on your site. And by the way, we're going to use that data and we can price undercut your advertising using that data. So now this looks like a monopoly rent. And what happens is you go to the New York Times, you're reading the automotive section, the New York Times can sell ads to you for automotive manufacturers at $40 CPM. But now you go to Facebook in the afternoon, and Facebook, because it has watched and recorded what you're reading on another site, can now also monetize you by showing you automotive ads because it now knows that information about you. And if it wants, it can sell those targeted ads to you for $30, price undercutting the New York Times, instead of what the New York Times charges is $40. Now, of course, the New York Times has to charge more because they paid the writers to create the content in the first place. And Facebook looks like it just got an unfair advantage by being able to sort of scrape and track you on other sites and now use it when it's selling its own advertising.
So we have a situation here where it's almost like the media outside of Facebook and Google are almost like workers in an industry owned town where they really only get script in some respects. And they ultimately, because of this dynamic, have to buy from the company that they're working for in some respects. I mean, that's basically what that delta is, right? That's the New York Times, providing a kickback to Facebook, but it's one that ultimately undercuts the ability for the New York Times to compete in the marketplace, which is why we're seeing the failure of so many of these media companies. On top of which, I guess it also undermines, what kind of content that they put out. And so this dynamic is ongoing. And I guess we see this too in Google and YouTube. You cannot compete with the YouTube platform because Google has all this extra information that they have basically. And I guess we see this also. This dynamic, we saw this dynamic with Walmart and their suppliers. They have this monopsony, I guess it is, and they forced the suppliers to do some, I guess, basically push their quality down or to limit, how they produce things so that they can sell to Walmart because Walmart's the only buyer in town in this instance. Part of the problem is at that point, when you only have one competitor, is you can't have, you get into all these questions of like censorship on Facebook and YouTube because they're the only game in town. So we just have about a minute and a half left here. Broad strokes, what do we do to deal with this problem?
I think the easiest way to deal with all of these different problems in one stroke is to prohibit companies from tracking consumers after they leave their own site unless the consumer opts in, or give consumers the right to opt out of tracking, which is something that Senator Hawley recently proposed, the Do Not Track bill. Let them opt out of being tracked, just like they had once the right to, or they still do, to opt out of receiving telemarketing calls at the home. And, we could see mass adoption of consumers, signing up for a do not track list. And that would solve the problems for consumers from a privacy perspective. It would solve the problem for news publishers. It would solve the problem of other independent journalists. That's probably the easiest way to fix all of the problems that we're seeing. And we've recently seen the association that represents news publishers in D.C. come out and support, this very idea.